The launch of Black Ops 6 Zombies was very well executed. We received 2 high-quality maps with tons of new content. The Zombies community hadn't been this positive of the mode since Chronicles released all the way in 2017. In many ways, it seemed like we were entering a new golden age of Call of Duty Zombies, one that could rival Black Ops 3's throne as the best game in franchise history. But 2 strong maps are far from enough to solidify Black Ops 6 as a great game. In fact, we're gonna need quite a few more, and preferably some classics. When Citadel de Moore was announced on November 7th, 2024, many people drew parallels between Citadel and another beloved map. Seeing an old castle in the mountains of Europe and 4 elemental wonder weapons obviously brought a lot of attention to Citadel, as it shared these traits with the iconic Der Eisendrache. The overall positive reception of BO6 and the comparisons to Der Eisendrache put Citadel de Moore on a high pedestal. The expectations for a zombie map haven't been this elevated since the launch of Black Ops 4, which was 6 years ago. On December 5th, Citadel de Moore finally released, and with it came glowing reviews. For the most part, people instantly adored the map, claiming it was by far the best in Black Ops 6. My latest YouTube poll, asking fans what their favorite map in Black Ops 6 is, chose Citadel without hesitation. But these fans don't like the map just because it's similar to Der Eisendrache. Actually, once you go past the surface level, Citadel de Moore is a very unique map that brings its own atmosphere and tone. Atmospherically, Citadel de Moore absolutely excels. In this map, our crew of Maya, Weaver, Carver, and Gray take on a castle occupied by the French Syndicate. When you spawn in, the first thing you see is a massive statue almost protecting the castle behind it. The citadel itself is absolutely beautiful, but old and run down, with graffiti masking the walls. Fog is layered all throughout, setting an eerie and mysterious tone, which fits with the rest of the aesthetic perfectly. Similar to Liberty Falls and Terminus, the skybox is a bit underwhelming. It's partly cloudy right before sunset, which is nice to look at but doesn't hold a candle to the skybox of maps like Die Rise or Tag der Toten. It appears in Black Ops 6, Treyarch is going for much more realistic locations for maps, rather than visually stunning environments, which honestly, I'm not a big fan of. The scenery outside of the map is fairly nice, but not nearly as beautiful as Der Eisendrache's. In Citadel, the mountain is elevated above a large lake, where in DE you are thousands of feet above a beautiful snowy valley with a city below. But still, the atmosphere of Citadel was well executed. Each location looks unique, and even the underground areas of the castle are easily distinguishable from each other, which is sometimes rare to come by in Zombies maps. The main colors of Citadel de Moore are tans, greens, and grays, and while these main colors are far from my favorite choices, they fit the aesthetic well. Personally, I prefer the saturated coloring of maps in Black Ops 3 and 4 over the more realistic styles in this game. If I had to pick one aspect of Citadel de Moore that impressed me the most, it would be the layout. The main reason being, this map is much different than most zombie maps in its design. Experiences like Origins or Der Eisendrache are giant spaces with no real designed flow. They work perfectly fine from a layout perspective, as it feels like you're in a smaller part of a giant map, and getting from point A to point B is usually easy. Then you have maps like Shadows of Evil and 9, which are distinctly divided into different categories. Shadows has each district, which relates to each playable character, and 9 has an area for each god or perk. Again, this style works perfectly fine. Citadel, on the other hand, attempts a layout design we haven't seen many times in Zombies history, which is a linear style. This design choice was common in early Zombies, but the only time we have seen it recently was in Black Ops 4's Voyage of Despair. This map took place on the Titanic, and they actually designed it around the real-life ship, with some added barriers and openings to make it feel more zombified. Unfortunately, the linear progression of this map was quite tedious, as it was extremely long but close quarters, and the multiple floors looked extremely similar to each other, making the layout confusing to the player. However, Citadel completely fixes these issues. The player spawns in at the very bottom of the map, having to pick between two sides of progression. On the left, you have the farm, and on the right, you have the village. It doesn't matter which one you choose, as both lead into the mysterious Citadel. Once you break open the door using the lion cannon, you simply unlock the doors within the castle, which again follow a linear progression. As I mentioned earlier, the Citadel itself is not confusing in the slightest. It has the entrance room with two ways to get into the dining hall, and then the dining hall has two pathways that lead underground and loop back up. As you can see, the cohesion in the layout is remarkably smooth. However, there is a major issue with linear maps. Getting from one side to another can be a nightmare, but thankfully, Citadel uses fast travel perfectly. There are fast travel points in each section of the map: the tavern near spawn, the lion cannon just outside the castle, and the sewer in the undercroft. Treyarch designed it perfectly. No matter where you are on the map, you can get where you need to go very quickly. On top of this, the travel options are pretty cool and fun. The lion cannon launches you into the sky, and the sewers make for a fun adventure. Citadel de Moore's layout doesn't stop there. It has a strong variety of area designs. For the most part, it's a pretty close quarters map, at least for Black Ops 6. The Citadel itself can get very difficult and offer a challenge that you cannot get anywhere else in BO6 thus far. The spawn room is very open and makes for a great training area, while the farm and village regions are somewhere in the middle on the challenge scale. Another aspect of the layout that was executed perfectly was how the Easter egg includes each part of the map. The Citadel holds most of the quest, but the spawn room, tavern, village, and farm all have important steps as well. The Easter egg itself is jam-packed with content, from engaging steps to fun wonder weapons and an unexpected plot twist. This Easter egg truly has it all, but there are a few issues. To start, the swords are extremely fun. We haven't gotten 4 elemental wonder weapons since D Machine in Cold War, so I'm happy this staple in the franchise has made a return, but I think they could have handled the swords a bit better. The fire sword has an extremely straightforward quest that was honestly a tad bit easy. It requires the player to pick up the sword from the knight, place it in the dragon statue found in the entrance hall, and essentially collect fire and bring it back to the sword. The fire is located in 3 cauldrons around the map, and you simply have to grab it, sprint back with a speed boost, and place it on the sword before you get engulfed in flames. After completing this task at 3 cauldrons, the upgraded Caliburn sword is now yours, providing the player with not only the base swing and parry attacks that all the swords offer, but also a massive fire explosion attack. This ranged ability wipes out hordes easily and surprisingly has a great range. Overall, the fire sword is tremendous and my second favorite sword of the bunch. The Stagger lightning sword has a simple but enjoyable quest. The goal is to collect 3 lightning rods around the map. The first is located just outside the barn. The second is in the village where you have to shoot a power box and it drops the rod from a pole. And the third simply drops from a zombie. Once you collect all 3 rods, you bring them to the outside portion of the Citadel where you place them in a contraption that spawns a storm cloud above the player. While holding the sword, it will be struck by lightning 3 times and the player needs to hit each of the lightning rods. Once this is done, the Stag sword is completed. The special attack fires a beam of lightning that electrocutes zombies and causes a chain effect between them, similar to the Wonderwaff DG2. Unfortunately, the speed of effect on the sword is extremely low. It takes a second for the zombies to actually become electrocuted, making it far from a life-saving wonder weapon. Due to this fundamental flaw of the Stag sword, it is without a doubt my least favorite. The next elemental weapon is the Raven or Void sword. This one is arguably the most interesting because I think it has the weirdest quest. Every other sword has extremely simple to follow objectives, and I think most players could figure them out on their own if given enough time. But the Void sword is much more confusing at first. The player is required to enter the alchemical lab and pick up one of 5 fossils. After picking up a fossil, the player must head to the tavern and spawn, and place the item and their sword on a peculiar contraption. A bunch of symbols will appear that are nowhere to be seen on the map. In fact, these are zodiac symbols, and you have to correlate the fossil item you picked up with the specific symbols. Thankfully, charts such as these have been created to save people the hassle of figuring out which zodiacs apply to which fossil. Otherwise, this step is significantly harder than the rest to complete. Once this is done, the player must escort a large amount of balls into purple voids in the ground. After filling each one of these voids, you must return to the contraption and watch the animation as it transforms into the upgraded Raven Sword. The special attack of this weapon is without a doubt the coolest of any of the swords. It essentially cuts a void into the map, acting as a Casimir grenade, slowly bringing zombies in and killing them. Overall, it's my third favorite of these wonder weapons. Finally, we have the Lion or Light Sword. This quest is the quickest once you have it down. Upon grabbing the sword, 4 glowing parasites spawn in the map. You must melee one of them, which will create a glowing effect. Then move into the village and find the door with a lion on it. Strike it and a yellow symbol will appear. Complete this process 3 more times, and finally, you will be able to enter the room. Once you enter this secret room, place your sword on the pedestal and shoot 4 symbols in the order it tells you with your gun. And just like that, the Lion Sword is complete. In my opinion, this one is absolutely the best. Its main special ability creates a light aura around the player, killing zombies instantly. On top of this, the charged Lion Sword causes zombies to drop more armor, which is essential late game. Both of these abilities, combined with how cool it is, gives me no choice but to put it as my favorite sword on the map. Overall, I thought the swords were well designed and mostly pretty good. The light, fire, and void swords were all well balanced. However, the lightning sword is a bit underpowered. My main issue with the swords lies in the fact that they can't damage multiple zombies at once. This inability to hit multiple enemies makes them feel less powerful and too similar to the base melee weapons that are already very strong. The power drill, for example, is absolutely amazing on this map, but we will get into that a bit later. In fact, we will now look at the bulk of the Easter egg, which will include spoilers. So skip to this point in the video if you don't want anything to be spoiled. And while you're doing that, please consider subscribing, as it allows me to bring you more amazing zombies content. The Easter egg as a whole is very enjoyable, even though the most memorable parts revolve around getting the swords. I personally loved the Maya cutscene, as it's rare we get cinematics outside of completing the main quest. After the Nathan cutscene on Terminus and now this one, Treyarch is definitely leading into Maya as the main character, which I'm personally fine with, as someone has to have personality on this crew. Gray and Carver still feel unbelievably lifeless 3 maps in, and I'm hoping Treyarch gives them something to do very soon. Aside from the lackluster development of characters in this Easter egg, the boss fight was absolutely amazing, at least visually. The scene of placing the Guardian Key into the statue and watching him reawaken and teleport the crew into the boss arena was nothing short of epic. The arena design as well as the boss looked great, but if I'm being honest, the gameplay was a tad bit underwhelming. My friends and I completed the Easter egg without looking online for help, so we went into this boss fight completely blind. Based on the fight against Patient 13 in Terminus, I assumed the Guardian would have quite a few challenging attacks for our first playthrough, but honestly, it was pretty easy. He really only has the stomp and jump attacks. After seeing the jump a few times, it was very predictable and easy to dodge. Also, I was very disappointed the swords didn't have a bigger role in this fight. They are a good option against the boss, but guns and even the power drill are significantly better. Thankfully, Treyarch did address the overpowered nature of the power drill, but they also nerfed the swords in the boss fight. However, they are walking back this nerf and will likely buff the swords to even better than they were before, so that's a good thing. Given the lack of difficulty and predictability of the boss, I would assume the wonder weapons would be more involved, but unfortunately, they're not. I have an idea that I think would make the fight much more fun, and encourage players to actually use the swords. Here it is. Once the boss enters his sleep mode during the fight, it would spawn these stone knights with swords. There would be as many knights as there are players in your lobby, so if you played with 2 people, 2 stone knights would spawn. These knights would each target one player and attack them with their sword. The knights can only take damage if struck by your sword, but just like you, they can parry your swings, essentially creating a 1v1 sword fight. Depending on which knight attacks you, there can be 2 different variations. Some knights would have more armor and slower attacks that deal more damage, while others attack and parry much faster but have less health and deal less damage. This idea of mine wouldn't make the boss fight significantly harder than it is now, but it would add some much needed variation to the mechanics and break up the repetition. After completing the boss fight, we are shown the final cutscene. The characters go back to Kraft's cell to find him being eaten by a few zombies. Under his final breath, he tells the crew to take the amulet to the excavation site and find the Sentinel artifact. Naturally, Weaver questions Croft about Richtofen's whereabouts, and he replies with,
Please don't kill him. He is my son. He's your what?
Overall, this revelation didn't feel that groundbreaking because we don't know Croft. He was introduced in Vanguard Zombies, and frankly, I had never heard of him before. In my opinion, this scene was essentially a Luke I am your father moment if we had never seen Darth Vader before. It just didn't hold any emotional weight. Once Croft dies, Ravenov tells the crew that the dig site is not far, so DLC 2 will likely be at this location. The mechanics of Citadel Des Morts were another major highlight. First and most importantly, no manglers. After Liberty Falls and Terminus, I assumed that manglers were going to be a Black Ops 6 problem, and I was unbelievably worried that every map moving forward would have these tedious boss zombies. Thankfully, Citadel introduced a new one and removed the manglers. The Doppelgasts are actually one of my favorite boss zombies ever. Their movements are quick and overwhelming to the player, plus their large size can suffocate you inside the castle. Treyarch did a good job at balancing out these traits by making them have very little health. The explosion they have on death is a creative gameplay feature that requires the player to be more conscious about their movement. Honestly, they are a fairly easy boss to fight against, but their fast movement speed makes the player respect them. My appreciation for the Doppelgasts likely stems more from my hatred towards manglers. Not getting shot by homing beams is a huge gameplay change that makes the entire experience much more fun. On top of this, the return of amalgamations feels even better in Citadel than it does in Terminus. Last time we saw the amalgamations, they were much more annoying to fight against as you constantly had to worry about dodging mangler shots. Now that you can actually focus your firepower on the amalgams, they immediately feel easier to deal with. Looking away from the main boss zombies, I'm not a fan of the boss rounds on Citadel Des Morts. On this map, both vermin and parasites make up your enemies for the boss round. The vermin make for a good casual boss zombie round, while I find the parasites to be annoying. However, when paired together, these rounds feel exceptionally tedious. It seems as though I'm constantly looking up to shoot parasites and down to shoot vermin, and I much would have preferred if they introduced a new enemy or simply stuck with the vermin. The traps on Citadel Des Morts are pretty hit or miss. The oil traps are inconvenient to use as you have to activate them from up top and they work down below, creating a trap that looks cool but wasn't designed too well. The eye traps essentially work like the Ring of Fire from Cold War Zombies, greatly buffing players who reside in them by offering increased damage and infinite ammo. These traps are fun and very good for high rounds. The last gameplay mechanic I want to mention are the incantations. These tactical grenades can be unlocked later in the Easter egg and are like mini versions of the swords. The fire and lightning ones in particular are extremely useful for taking out amalgams and doppelgasts, even holding the ability to one-shot these otherwise powerful enemies. I personally love how these incantations are only unlocked later in the Easter egg, as it feels like a nice reward for progressing so far. Similar to other aspects of Citadel de Moore, the replayability is top-notch. This map is definitely the most challenging in Black Ops 6 so far, so for me and many others, it makes it much more appealing to play. On top of this, there are quite a few fun side Easter eggs. You can be a bartender to zombies to get PhD Flopper, you can give cheese to 10 rats around the map to become the Rat King, you can get a chess piece to follow you around the map, you can get 10k free points out of the well, and many more. I do wish that Citadel offered a group egg like bowling on Liberty Falls or boat racing on Terminus, but nonetheless, these are enjoyable side Easter eggs. As far as camo grinding goes, this map is an amazing option, specifically for Opal and Nebula camos. The Doppelgast can be convenient to deal with compared to the Manglers. Amalgamations return, which I believe are much more pleasant than the abominations on Liberty Falls, so it could be a very viable option to camo grind on Citadel de Moore. Overall, the high quality of this map is really what makes its replayability strong. In the atmosphere department, Citadel de Moore will be receiving an 8.5. The layout gets a whopping 10, the Easter egg gets an 8, the mechanics get a 9, and finally, the replayability gets a 9. Citadel de Moore got an overall score of an 8.9 out of 10. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and go watch my last video, The Fatal Flaws of Black Ops 6 Zombies.